Hello, I'm the country counselor, also known as Lefty Winger. And, I've recently been reading about one of our ancient leaders. And he and his son are probably the most popular two kings that we've had in our past. And that was King David and King Solomon. Now, I recently did a little thing on King Solomon and his 700 wives. But I want to talk about King David for a few minutes. And as I read through, I couldn't help but see the similarities between King David and President Trump. And for whatever reason, I just kind of picture David as a Republican. Conservative, pro-life, leader on climate change. And David was in constant conflict, in constant battle with the Philistines. So I just view Philistines as Democrats. So, when I'm reading through my Bible and I see the word Philistines, I just insert the word Democrat. Now, the first Philistine that we have a record of, that I'm aware of anyway, that David had with the Philistines was with Goliath, the giant. Now, Goliath was this bigger than life figure, 9 foot 9 inches tall. Nobody could take him on. Everybody was afraid of him. So when I read the word Goliath, I just insert the word Hillary. It kind of makes the whole story come alive for me a little bit. And you got to get this picture. See, what you had is you had Goliath and the Philistine army on one mountain, and on another next mountain over, you had King Saul and the Israeli armies. And every morning, every evening, Goliath would come out and he would taunt the Israeli soldiers. Again, everybody was afraid of him. And he would holler across the valley to the Israeli soldiers. And he'd yell, "You deplorables!" or something like that, I don't know. And you got to keep in mind, you got to picture this giant, 9 foot 9 inches tall, had on full armor, had a big bronze helmet. He had on, the Bible calls it this coat of mail. It was a big bronze shield, said weighed like 125 pounds. He had a sword that was 12, 15 foot long and so forth. That was his armor. Now, Hillary's armor was the FBI. And the CIA and the Justice Department, the swamp. That was her armor. And then also, in looking at David and President Trump, a lot of people give President Trump a lot of grief over some of the things that he says to people. Now, let me tell you what David said one time. David told Goliath, he said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut your head off, and I'm going to feed your body to the birds and the beasts." Now, to me, that's a whole lot worse than saying lock her up. Then they give Trump, a hard time over the things that he's done and getting personal. Let me tell you, David once went out and circumcised 200 Philistines. Now that is getting personal. Then he brought them back, the foreskins back, as proof of what he had done. They didn't have rubber gloves back then. How would you like to have the job of counting them into evidence? What if Trump went out and circumcised 200 Democrats? That would be an impeachable offense. That would be abuse of power. Now, David at this time was only about 13 years old. And we can tell from the Bible tells us plainly that he was already bragging. The Bible doesn't use that word, but he was already talking about killing bears and lions, and he's 13. Barehanded. So we can see at this young age that David is already developing some Trump-like characteristics. Of course, President Trump has not accomplished any more than he's told you he has, okay? But now he's a warrior. That's one of the ways that he fights. Nobody else, or most people's not taking up for him, so he's going to have to tell you what he's doing. Right? Now, one person that we don't think of, doesn't come to mind automatic when we think of Goliath, this giant, is Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler is so short, you could stack one Nadler on another and you'd still have to look up at the giant. I am surprised that the president hasn't nicknamed him the Troll. Let me get serious with you for a minute. So I think there are times that God says enough's enough. I think one of those times was when with David and Goliath. I think God was fed up with Goliath and the way they were treating the Israelite army. And God raised up this boy, this young boy, and a slingshot to take out this 9 foot 9 inch tall giant that had full body armor. But see, David understood the battle was the Lord's. That was God's doing. David understood that. I think another one of those times is right now. I think God has had it with our killing his babies, with the corruption. We've always had division and always will. But he's had it with us taking his babies. Now, whether you love him or whether you hate him, I believe that God has raised up Donald Trump to stand against God's enemies. Now, Christians, you need to listen. Who are God's enemies? They're those that stand for abortion, gay marriage, open borders. They want to take our religious freedom away. They're for excessive taxes. They want a weak military. They want liberal judges. They want to take our guns. They want excessive regulations. And they want entitlements in order to control people. And I could go on and on. Now, the rights in our Constitution are rights that God wanted us to have. And I tell you, I get upset with Christians that try to justify abortion because it's their party's agenda. And they say things like, well, it's a fetus. It's a human life God has created. Or they say, well, it's the woman's body. No, it's not. It's a separate human being that's inside her body as a result of her choices almost all the time. And it's not like some ugly wart that shows up on the end of your nose that you need to remove. But that's the way we've been treating them. And then they say, well, it's the woman's right to choose. Her choice does not include taking the life of an infant. You know, I did not vote for Donald Trump in the primary. But when it came to the general election, I didn't have any choice but to vote for him. Because God holds me accountable to vote. But I made a serious mistake for years in trying to decide who do I need to vote for. That's the wrong approach. You need to decide what am I going to vote for. And see, I cannot vote for things that God calls an abomination. Can't do it. Don't want to do it. And when I vote with my party for things that stands against what God says, then I have made my party my God, because I have set my party above God. And that's very serious. And I voted Democrat for years. And it was like God saying, what are you doing? Do you not know what my word says about when life begins? Do you not know what my word says about same-sex marriage? And we can't say, oh, well, that's politics. That's separate. It's not separate. Did you know that God instituted 3 institutions, the family, the church, and government? Government was God's idea. And God wanted to be put first in the family. He wanted to be put first in the church. And he wanted to be put first in the government. He didn't want the government running the church, but he wanted the principles of the church and the principles of God to run government. See, we cannot take God out of politics and prosper. You know what will happen? You'll go socialist. See, capitalism was God's plan for prosperity. Socialism is anti-God. Again, capitalism is God's plan for prosperity. And when a nation looks to God, puts their faith in God, and blesses Israel, that nation will be blessed. And when you read through your Bible, you're going to see that God judged leaders based on whether they brought the people closer to God and his principles or further away. So again, God holds me accountable for what I am voting for. Now, we're never going to find a perfect candidate. And well, he did this. We're going to look at their personal sin. God did not judge their personal sin when he was looking at their leadership toward the nation. Now, don't hear me saying that he overlooked their personal sin, because he didn't. King David had a lot of it, and he paid a severe price for it. But God, looking at the leader, he deals with them on their personal sin, but he's looking at the leader. Are they bringing the nation closer to God and his principles or further away? That's important. And see, we cannot vote based on likability or personality or what we might personally gain financially. Again, if we'll vote for what's right and God's principles, the economics will take care of themselves. And we can see that God chose many unlikely people to lead. Gideon, the least of the least, the Bible says. Look at the disciples, rough fishermen. The Apostle Paul, who'd killed Christians. That's who God chose to lead. And God chose Donald Trump, the most unlikely person in the world that you can think of, to lead this nation back toward God. Go figure. And keep this in mind, every leader that God has sent has been greatly opposed and greatly attacked. Just a given. Look at Jesus, the very Son of God. They called him a devil, the devil. And they went on to crucify him. Now, Christians, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how the demon-possessed people in the Bible that Jesus dealt with, how they knew, even though they'd been living out in the cemetery, how did they know that Jesus was the Son of God? It was because the Spirit that was in them and speaking through them knew Jesus was the Son of God. Got a question? Have you ever wondered why the opposition to Trump all have the same words and talking points? Think about it. See, every person on planet Earth has a spiritual father. See, the Bible in John 4:24 says that God is a spirit. Jesus in John 8:44, he was talking to some religious people, and he said, it's your father the devil. And he was speaking on a spiritual term. 1 Thessalonians 5:23 says, we are spirits. It says, may your entire spirit, your soul, and your body. We are a spirit that has a soul that lives in a body that's going to die. Spirit's going to live on. So, since God is a spirit, the enemy is a spirit, and we are spirits, that really makes everything spiritual. And here's what I want you to remember. It's a spiritual war, and politics is one of the main arenas that the battle is fought. Okay? Politics is one of the main arenas that this spiritual war is being fought on. That will give you something to think about. Till next time, God bless. God bless America. And when you read your Bible and read the word Philistine, what are you going to put in there? Democrats. Okay? God bless.